Societal and political trends are rapidly breaking down the family that once was the cornerstone of our great American culture. At FIT, we know you cannot get this information on your own, so we'll bring it to your TV every single week. And we always invite all opposing views. I often say I wish I had the opportunity to talk to my mediation couples in the days preceding their decision to separate, when counseling and an effective support team can be implemented. This is the time when change has opportunity. Once you've decided I'm done, it is usually too late. This program is dedicated for mediators and for people who haven't been divorced yet or even contemplating the throes, to understand some of the when and some of the where couples can be saved of the anguish of divorce and the complicated dysfunctions that follow their family when divorcing is imminent and before you go to court. I have with me two experts. On my far right, Dr. Carlos Rivera, pediatrician and victim of court abuses, and to his right, Gary Jacobs, ALR president and family law reformer. Okay, this is expert enough. We've been through the mill. We should be able to handle this topic, right? Okay, so what will we say? You know, if you think about it, you meet a couple and one of them's talking about divorce. Without even knowing what the other one's doing, what would you say?
I would say don't do it.
Don't divorce.
I would say really think about it, because sometimes, I can't tell you how many people I've spoken to who went through this horrible divorce and said, as much as I hate my ex, my husband, my wife, if I could do it all over again, I would stay with them and let this thing go through, wait till my kids graduate high school or college, and then do the divorce. And you know what? I actually think if you can, that's good advice. And then people who don't know will say, yeah, but it's horrible for the kids being in a household where there's fighting. I say that's nonsense. You know what? That's part of growing up. And you know what? As bad as it may be, seeing some fighting, it's much worse. And you know it, and Carlos knows it. It's much worse. If you really do care about the kids, it's much worse what this court system puts them through.
See, that's what you want to warn them
So
about.
I would warn them. I counsel people all the time.
Yeah.
Don't do it. First of all, how many times do you know people go through a bad, relationship? There's ups, there's downs, and then I've said, hey, stay divorced, and then they chicken out because I say, look,
Sure.
you live on Long Island, you just can't freaking afford it. So
Right.
for no other reason, you can't afford. And then they come back and they go, you know what? Now it's a year later. You know what? Things aren't so bad, and you know what? The kids are older.
It's hard to play into the change of heart, isn't it? I mean, think about it. When you're having these issues, it's hard to go from where I'm angry, where I am in this particular place. I can't ever get to the place where I can
I
possibly
think the biggest
reconcile.
problem is that when the person's angry and they're thinking, oh my God, I can't stand this person, I want to leave, we're going to a bad stage, and they go see a lawyer.
Right.
And the lawyer who makes his living filing divorce, it's just horrible for your kids. I could give you the speech, Chris, right?
Yeah.
You deserve to be happy. It's horrible for your kids seeing the fighting. Just get divorced. You're the mother, you're going to get custody.
And those people probably are divorced because they want to see you go through the same pain.
Exactly.
What about
I actually
you,
want
Doc?
to interject a little bit, only because there were some things you mentioned, and I think there's some subtle nuances, or at least a small difference of opinion I have. For the past 15 years of my career, I'll watch these couples come in when they have, pediatrician, I forgot to mention, and that I'll see them come in with their child, and they're very excited, they're a very unified family, they're doing, they're painting the American dream, or they're living their dream. And eventually you could see it slowly, the distance start to grow, and then there's usually one person who's disgruntled, and so on and so forth, and it evolves. And what I usually tell people is, like, think about it. Really think about it. Think about why you got together in the first place. Think about what's driving you apart, and try to find these things. But I think people get frustrated easily, and they look to jump into divorce, like they're done and they move on. So I do have some minor disagreements with some of the points that Gary brought out. I think that as far as children go, if you're in a dysfunctional home, you're in a dysfunctional home, and I do see, unfortunately, the children that are living in the home with two parents that are on the rocks, and there's a lot of confusion, a lot of brings out a lot of emotional issues in the children. So usually what I try to do is to tell people who come to me now, say, give it time, try to figure it out, whatever you do, try to make it, try to keep it from the children. And these are things, and to go back to the original point was that you don't know where to look for help until you get in trouble. So it's almost like you're in a riptide, and now you're trying to figure out how to get back to the shore.
I'm glad you said that. That was my second question. I'll make it my first question now. There's basically a consulting pecking order, which if everybody thought about where they would want to go first, they would want to think about, well, who do I want to see first? Most people accidentally go and bump into a lawyer, or somebody recommends a lawyer right away.
Free consultations.
The last, that's the last. As a matter of fact, it's not even on my list. The first person you should see, in my opinion, is a family member. If you can, if it's possible. Maybe your family members are wackier than you are, and maybe you don't want to do that. But then you would see your friends, somebody who knows you well enough to share in your life, anybody who that might be. The third is a psychological counselor or professional. And the last would be a mediator if you really can't get past all those things. You know,
I think a counselor is important, a marriage counselor.
Yeah.
You know, even though I'm not really a therapy person, and I don't think in the long run it's going to take a bad marriage and make it a good marriage. But I think if you both come in saying, look, for our kids' sakes, we want to either peacefully coexist, you know, because to me, I've told people sometimes too, if it's totally over, you know what, on Long Island, you both can't afford to live unless you're making millions of dollars. But maybe one of the options, and I don't know how you guys feel about it, is saying, you know what, let's peacefully coexist for the kids' sake.
Well,
It's
a
not
lot
the
of people
best
stay
situation,
there.
but like Carlos said, you got to leave the kids out. But once you go to divorce court, there is no leaving the kids out.
See, here's what
The kids are in.
we're going to have some exchange here regarding that situation, because years ago, staying together for the sake of the kids was the mantra, if you remember.
Right.
Years
Sure.
ago. I don't know if you remember, because you guys are
Absolutely.
too young, much younger than I am. So,
Well, my parents did it.
oh, so they
wait until the
remember.
kids graduated. Wait till the kids
Okay,
move out of the
I
house.
think personally, in most cases, maybe not all, in most cases, that was beneficial.
I'm glad they did it.
See?
Honestly, I'm glad.
I think it does. Even if you're apart or you're not getting along well, there's some value to the kids recognizing that those are still my parents, even though they may not be. We can't evaluate as a 9-year-old or as an 11-year-old how effective the parenting is. Not effectively, unless it's abuse.
But I think
or
if you're
something.
coming to an agreement that you're staying together for the kids, that lessens like all this stress that you're talking about. And maybe, listen, I even know people who stay together and then they even date. You know, they have
That's
their
right, or
days
even
out of
gotten
the
back
week.
together. Let's ask the professional, Doc.
Well, one of the things I think of, we kind of left out clergy, where some people respond to clergy
Right.
to the list of people you go to.
I'm sorry, that's part of what I would consider to be the psychological counsel
Sure, I'm
portion.
sorry. Yeah,
I'm
sure.
sorry.
But one of the other things is I think that when, as far as the effects on children, there's a lot to be said about trying to work problems out and demonstrating to children that, you know, we can disagree. Maybe there may be an argument that kind of gets a little bit, it escalates somewhat. Maybe there'll be something uncomfortable to watch, maybe some yelling. But parents should be able to step back, resolve these issues, and demonstrate to children that
Working things through.
you can resolve it. I think one of the problems is there's a mix of New Age thought and antiquated thought regarding marriage, where till death do us part and stay in it through the children. Yet I think that there's a breakdown of family, which is a topic you've done many times on your show, where I truly believe that we no longer have family time together. We try to push on careers. We try to keep up with the neighbors. And these things lead to a distance in the family.
You're saying it's
And
symptomatic.
It is. And this is a large, it's a little bit too large to kind of encompass right now in this conversation. But those are the dynamics. And if you could keep it together for the kids, I think that people quit too early, and that they should try to work these out. They should use outside resources. One of my concerns with families is that people are passionate to support the person they love. So in that passion, you may get advice that really isn't the best advice. And I think that a little bit of non-partial advice, say, even a mediator in the beginning might be interesting to try to guide them and say, listen, you really need to think about this before you start taking it to the next level. Talk with other professionals, like you mentioned before, to say, let's try to work on these things before you start making a decision with that much finality to
Coincidentally, I
it.
did that just the night before last at a couple that knew they wanted to head to divorce but weren't sure about how and when. So I recommended a separation agreement, which is entirely different. As a mediator, we can mediate towards a divorce without divorcing and decide whether that is imminent. In other words, you set the game plan up for how it would look. It's kind of like a preemptive step.
I think that you make a good point about family, because I tell people a lot of times, be careful what you tell your family, because, like, for example, if your spouse cheats on you and you go tell, well, I want to get a divorce because my husband went and slept with everybody in the neighborhood, and now you guys decide to get together. Well, you may have moved on, but the family didn't forget it, and then
Right.
once you let everything out of the bag. You know, let's say your husband maybe slapped you in a fight one day, and you never told anybody, but now you're getting divorced, and you talk to your family. By the way, he's such a jerk. One day he slapped me.
There's
There's
no
no
doubt.
going back.
Really, you have to be careful.
So you have
about
to
what
be
you're
careful.
saying.
I think like the other things are like, you know, it's important
Yeah.
to talk to other people.
I kind of wish, and sometimes unfortunately, I've become a role model for how things can go bad in a divorce. But in some ways, I try to take that and say, along with all of us, really,
Right.
let's try to help other people to avoid these pitfalls. And it's a shame that we can't have some kind of proactive approach where people, almost like a marriage counseling workshop, where people go, listen, before you start doing this and you react in anger, here's some of the reality of what happens when you separate, when you break up, the effects on the children, financially what's going on, how the law, whatever, the attorneys
but that's
get money,
right, that's
and it
right.
really breaks apart the family, and it breaks apart the family's future potential to keep together and have a stable relationship.
That's what I was worried about, because a lot of people break down the future family, the family that's out there maybe with one parent mostly doing the guiding and the other parent not necessarily there. Let's use that example because we're familiar with that. It seems like the dysfunction lays a little bit heavier on the kids in that environment than it would be had the parents stayed together. So there's consequences to our decisions, so this emotional impact we talk about that drives that force to be angry and decide too quickly is a critical issue, and that's what I wanted to concentrate on. Are we deciding too quickly? Can we recognize that maybe the other parent, even if we're angry, has value to my kids?
But I think the caveat to the whole thing is if you could divorce civilly, it's different than when I was saying how, hey, listen, if it was up to me, I would never put my kids through what they went through in the divorce. I'd stay together and be unhappy because I wouldn't want my kids.
You had no idea.
But the caveat is if somebody would say, you know what, we both love our kids and let's agree to shared parenting and let's agree not to fight and let's agree not to spend all the money with lawyers, and that's a different, I mean, listen, in other countries, they divorce civilly. In Scandinavia, we talk about, they divorce.
Yeah.
I would say, if you don't get along and you're fighting, you live in Scandinavia, you know what? Get a divorce. It's okay. The kids don't love it, but they don't get all screwed up like they do, especially in New York, and especially in Suffolk County, New York.
Well, you're talking about a lot of the application of family law, which is certainly something we should share a little bit with, because we've all suffered through the application.
But we can't change it, so I think you wanted the show to be what could you do? We have to deal with the reality. We don't live in Scandinavia. We live in a country where we have a corrupt system.
But the people who are watching this program want to know that the cookie cutter approach or the boilerplate approach to how family law applies itself to you is different than how it applies to you.
Well,
I mean, we're getting a different kind of scenario out of the results.
I appreciate that, and I think that one of the things too is why we say we don't live in Scandinavia. This is the reality here. I think that we have a societal acceptance that divorces are supposed to be ugly. There's a winner. There's annihilation, and I think we need to change that. That the problem is that people are embarrassed to tell what happens in a divorce. They don't want to state the reality, and then it's hard to say like, looking back, I made these mistakes. Maybe I shouldn't have done this. And I think that the people who are victims now need to speak out and allow people to say, listen, let's think about it. Here's what really happens. It doesn't have to be this way, and maybe that'll change in the future. So shows like this I think that they will be a catalyst for this kind of change to come about.
To me, it's a no-brainer. What we're doing here is something that probably, if everybody were to watch it, but
they have to have an open mind to it, because what happens, unfortunately, again, I go back to the lawyers, but they go to the lawyer and they say, don't listen to what that Chris mediator told you. Don't listen to that show on Dr. Rivera. You're entitled to this. You're entitled to this. And I had just had a case recently where somebody came, and a woman, and I said, listen, share custody. It's best for the kids. She said, you know what? I agree. As long as I can live, I'll share custody. Well, 6 months later, she came to me, and the husband had her arrested and all this other nonsense. And I said, what happened? You were going to shared custody. She said, well, my lawyer said, just file for custody, and then we'll negotiate down. Once you file that custody, and you try to take away
the other side. So the
you try to take away the kids.
That's my problem
and they're
with
smart.
the law.
They know what they did.
Zealously application of law by an attorney inside the courtroom with the family involved is where I draw the line. I can't figure out how that's ever going to work. If you're overprotecting one side, even if you're successful overprotecting one side, then the other part,
what's a good lawyer?
The other side's automatically unprotected, is not protected as well.
Lawyer, right? The good divorce lawyer is the one who takes custody from the other person, gets the most money from the other person, destroys them in court.
It's painful to hear this, but you're absolutely
That's
right.
What they say. I want a pit bull. Whoever says I want a good lawyer who's going to work on my divorce and let me come out with sanity, they want a pit bull.
But I think that if we kind of show people like, the gain isn't for the family, for the children, it's actually for them. So they're going to set us up to do these things. Again, this would be like a workshop to warn people, like, this is what they're
That's
really
what I was
doing.
trying to get at, right.
You need to watch out for this, because I look back and I can't believe how much good advice I ignored because I was like, That'll never happen in the system. No way. I believe in truth and justice and the
Yeah.
American way. This is what I was raised with. And then you find out that is not
Thank
how
you
it
for
goes.
pointing that out, because I think everybody fell into that
Yes,
trap. I did too.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
we had a
Yeah.
case just
How
recently.
could
that
a judge be unfair?
Chris and I had the transcripts, and the
Yeah.
person was divorcing, and they told the judge, they said, well, the judge said, well, you keep coming to court, and you're destroying your life. And he said, but Judge, I think the truth is eventually going to come out. And the judge, who's a sitting judge in Suffolk County Family Court today, said on the record, and I'm paraphrasing, but listen, people come here every day. They lie to us all the time. Every one of us knows that everything that's coming out of their mouth is a lie. And guess what? His quote, and I'm quoting this part, we don't necessarily condone it. That's the quote. We don't
Right.
necessarily condone, but nobody does anything about it. We never refer it to the DA, and we never prosecute
And there's
it.
no place for that in court to go that far.
So
with
there is
anything.
no truth coming out.
Yeah.
That is true. And
in
that's
court.
the
And
sad
you
part.
know, listen, you were vilified in court.
Oh,
You were
absolutely.
vilified.
It turns out that, people knew about my case before I even got there. So the stage was set. So I walked in, and I refer to myself quite often as a lamb coming to slaughter. That,
Right.
I'm thinking I'm telling the truth will prevail.
gonna
and
matter.
I'm bringing all this evidence, and then, this gets failed, that gets failed to be presented, and next thing you know, you're sitting there and you can't believe what happened. That there is no truth. It's how you play the game.
Kids are coming out consequentially dysfunctional in droves. I think what you were mentioning before about where they are in separation in the family by looking at the electronic machines and being separated, not spending enough time at dinner, that whole
Sure.
genre, I think is really working against the family. We're in a place where the family law works against the family. Where do you go? What can you do? Where do you go next? What can we recommend to the John Q. public out there who may have divorce imminent in their lives?
Again, informing them. Somebody has to be willing to speak out and to say, this is what happened to me. If you want to avoid being a victim, here's what we do. You need to sit back, spend the time to try to bring your family back. And I'm diverging from where we should be. But I think we have to define these things, stop and take a look, because this grows insidiously. So these problems develop slowly over time. Then suddenly we hit that point where we want a magic fix. It doesn't work that way. And you have to let people know what's the reality, and let's go back. Here are the things, the options we should try. And divorce isn't like this bright star on the horizon where our lives are going to be better. Your life actually becomes incredibly more complicated.
That's
and
a
actually,
message that has to be delivered too.
Yeah.
Because in effect, what parents do you know with their children, how they managed it, did much better after divorce?
That's true. If they talk to people, say, how do you do after? Yeah, are you better before?
Yeah.
Or almost everybody I talk to.
Which is why you
says-
started the program today,
Exactly.
yeah.
I said, you know what? They said, as miserable as I was less miserable before.
it's,
And I hear it a lot.
Yeah, the emotional impact, though, for one party moving away from the relationship is too much for the other party to handle. There's some kind of effect has to be managed to the aggrieved party. When I'm doing a mediation and I see one party's obviously the one who's going to lose out here doesn't really want the divorce, I have to tend more to that person. Wouldn't that be something that would be advisable for that person in the divorce, even without mediation involved? That to get help or have themselves supported, get themselves straight back together, that they're a worthy person, because that unworthiness shows up.
Sure.
The aggrieved party becomes unworthy in some way.
I think that part of it you feel like, I deserve this, that this came about, look what happened to my children, and this, that, and the other thing. And it's interesting, I find much of Gary's advice to be dead on and wonderful. I'm starting to find myself kind of interjecting with some things and saying, I have a counterpoint on this. And one of the things I found through divorce, and you have to be with the right person, is that I actually learned that I became a better father, and I'm not proud to admit this, after divorce than I was before, because
lot of people do.
there was always tomorrow. Now it's like you realize how precious the moments you had right there and then, so you try to fix them. People need to be aware of these things, exactly what you're saying and Gary's saying. Like, this is really the reality of divorce. It isn't where things are going to get better because you just broke off this horrible relationship. Go
It's
back.
like the woman who I hear all the time say, well, why are you getting a divorce? Well, he's never home and he's never there for the kids. Well, what do you think's going to happen when he gets kicked out of the house and he sees the kids for dinner and every other weekend? You think he's going to be there more often? Or you think some other guy is going to now step in and become the new father who's going to be there?
Let's quickly handle that subject,
Right?
because the parent who's making the first entry into another relationship has an additional post effect to the aggrieved party. Because the aggrieved party is often not the one who has the relationship. Sometimes it is, of course,
Sure.
I understand that. But then that's a double whammy. They're not only not loved by the other party, but now that other party jumped to another relationship.
Well, a lot of times what I see when the people get, I mean, I'm not a psychologist, and you have more training in this certainly, but just, anecdotally, a lot of times it's the person who wants a divorce who has their issues within themselves. Maybe they have they're not happy with their lives. So because of all the stuff that we see in the media that, hey, you're going to get divorced, you're going to get listen, it sounds great, right? You're going to get, you have 2 kids, you're going to get 20-something% child support, you're going to get alimony, you're going to get 50%, and I don't have to answer to anybody, I don't have to come. But it's really the problem is with that person, where if they would get therapy to realize that maybe, because let me tell you, if you're not happy when you're married, you ain't going to be happy when you get divorced.
What did they do? I'd like to know what.
And I think your wife, I mean, not to speak, but she was sort of an example. She's not a happy person now.
No,
so she's not like, hey, life is great.
But she doesn't want to pick at it.
He doesn't want, but listen, she put you in jail. That didn't make her happy, did it?
No, and I would hate to say something, negative towards her. I think again, it's fueled by anger, and it's fueled by advice around you, people that are passionate with the wrong advice. And I often tell people, it's like they can't see clearly. It's almost like looking through fogged glass, where you could kind of make out a shape, but you can't quite see the details because you're so angry. You're not making the right decisions. And I think that's a big part of it. And then I wanted to touch quickly on one of the things you were talking about, because I'm very happy with, although I have a lot of problems with society's views and norms, there are some things that are breaking on the horizon now, where like documentaries on divorce and terms like blended family. And I think that sometimes things like that are cliche, but at the same time, it helps people to understand, like, you can mesh with an extended family now, that someone coming in isn't necessarily a threat. The relationship or the marriage didn't work out, but you can bring somebody in, and the focus, my big focus is what happens to the children. There's more love for the children, and we should avoid negative talk about the other parent and this and that. If that new person came in, that's because the one parent fell in love with someone again, for whatever reasons it may be. We may agree with them morally.
Noble for you to say that, but it's not so easy necessarily to deal with.
It isn't, but we have to start letting people, again, raising the awareness that it doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't have to be an animosity. We can blend families together. There's more love. There's a more positive environment for the children to be in, and maybe we could learn not to be angry with what happened. The past is the past. It didn't work out for you, and that's sad. But let's move on with where we are. You're in a new relationship. I'm in a new relationship. We always have the children together. Let's make it the best for them. This whole thing where we win, I'm going to destroy the other person, there's nothing left. You have no family. You have no ability to provide for them. It's a horrible situation. People need to know that, okay, let's move on. Let's move forward. Let's move forward peacefully. Move forward peacefully. Things are going to be much better for everyone involved.
Absolutely.
When you said win, I tell people all the time when they go, well, this attorney's so good, I know I'm going to win in court.
Yeah,
I said,
really.
Listen, if you win, you lose.
What do you always say? There are
There's
sales.
absolutely no winning whatsoever.
Right,
No, I
there's
wish there was
salespeople.
somebody-
What are they winning? So you win and you destroyed the. Listen, so I mean, not to bring up your case, but if your wife won because she destroyed your life, how does that win? Your kids are wrecked. You destroyed your career, so there's less money going on. My wife, she won. My wife, she won. She got the kids to not talk to me anymore, and now my kids have all these issues because they didn't talk to me. Listen, I moved on with my life.
Yeah,
I mean, I miss my
Gary,
kids.
you're
but
lucky. There's
no
a lot
winning.
of people who don't get to the point that you're in.
Right, but there is no winning.
Right, I know.
There isn't. I promise anybody who's watching the
the
show,
theory-
you will not win.
Even if you
Absolutely.
win money.
Even
which
if
I
you
think-
win money,
I think
exactly.
that's the other word. The other word
Well, a lot
is
of
money.
it's money.
A lot of it is
you
to
could
do with
win all the money and be the most unhappy. What's that saying? The richest people in the world, I feel sorry for them because they only have money or something to that effect. Money does not make
Money's
you
not
win.
everything, that's for sure. Well, we captured this idea very well, and I appreciate your efforts here, Dr. Carlos Rivera and Gary Jacob. Societal and political trends are rapidly breaking down the family that once was the cornerstone of our great American culture, and at FIT we know you cannot get this information on your own, so we'll bring it to your TV every single week, and we always invite all opposing views. My name is Chris DiMaggio. Thank you for watching FIT TV, and we'll see you again next week.